I was born in Savannah, right here, and grew up here, went to school here in Savannah, Illinois, graduating with the class in 1983. My father was a coroner, also as I was growing up. And so I entered the coroner's office as an assistant, really, in 1980. And I was 16 years old, and my dad was going on a coroner's call with an accident. And so he said, "Hey, I need some help. Would you come along?" And so he brought me along as an assistant, and that was my first experience with the coroner's office. I had an interest. I'd already had an interest in the business that he worked in, which is the funeral business. And so this seemed to be associated and part of that too. So it was exciting for me as a kid at that age to go along with him. It was also very eye-opening, and it was a vehicle accident, so I think he was also thinking that, hey, my kid's able to drive now, and it doesn't hurt him to see what can really happen on the roads. At 16, I was excited to go.
Other than him taking you on those trips to accidents or scenes like that, you never actually got a chance to work with your father.
I did not. But I watched as he managed the coroner's office. I was at home, a kid. And the county of Carroll had the idea that they could do away with the coroner's office at that time. It was between 1980 and 1984 timeframe. And it was a cost savings measure. And so my dad argued against that, and argued against it mainly on the basis of not losing a check and balance system. The coroner position never disappeared. The discussions came up, and he had to go argue in front of the county board and present his side of the reasoning why to keep the coroner's office. And after he did that, the county decided to keep the coroner's office.
Oh, so he essentially had to make the case for himself for his own position, because he was coroner still at the time, right?
That is correct.
Gotcha.
That is correct.
So he was able to convince them.
Yes. And a big part of that was that part of the coroner's responsibility is to be a check on the rest of the system. My desire to be coroner was to follow in my dad's footsteps, and to work closely with my brother in those days. So I had a desire certainly to do it. And many people become a coroner that have not been in the funeral work before. So they also have a steep learning curve when they're elected coroner because it's an elected position. So when anyone is elected coroner, they automatically are required to go to training. And that's put on by the Illinois Training Board, Law Enforcement Training Board. And so you spend an intensive time with them, and then you go away and you really learn on the job, and you learn in your daily responsibilities, and as you go through it, you're learning. And so I had the benefit of learning for 14 years prior to being the coroner. There are a few cases that stick out. A lot of the work we do is routine because we're going to be involved in any unattended death. Meaning a doctor is not there, a nurse is not there, hospice is not there. It could be an accident on the roadway, it could be an accident at home, it could be a natural death that occurs while someone's out walking in a field. So many different things. There's all kinds of unique situations, and certainly one that was very newsworthy and very impactful on my personal life were the grain bin accidents that took place in Carroll County. And so I was in the midst of that, and actually very close to those individuals, those families that were in the midst of that also. I would say 2012 was a tough year in that time period. And that was after some big incidents and that were close to me. Also, that was through a divorce time period. And so those were difficult, and I wondered whether I wanted to be in the office still or not. whether I could continue to do a good job. I recircled and, I was reinvigorated just to do it. And, I kind of built that back just within myself. And so decided to continue on. And then probably the biggest factor that has helped me in recent years are my son's interest in working with me in the business that we operate, and then also as deputy coroners. So I have 2 sons at this time that are deputy coroners.
What time do you usually go to bed? What time do you think you went to bed that night?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock?
Yeah.
So we're kind of up on the, when do you typically wake up on a Sunday morning?
I'm probably up by 5 to 5:30.
Okay, so not too bad. So it's kind of like an alarm clock almost. When you typically wake up, you get a call on the morning of July 28th. Can you describe getting that call? What was your response and what was said to you?
Yeah, I believe the call came in at 5:20 or sometime in that range. And for me, I don't know what's taking place yet. So I then call the dispatcher at the county and find out that there's a roadway accident or a roadway, someone in the roadway. That's about all I know at that point. So I contacted one of the deputy coroners, knowing that it's a situation where we really need 2 people on scene. And this is a young deputy coroner that is not one of my sons, but lived right in Mount Carroll. And we were able to meet up right there at the scene and a short time after that.
At that time when you're getting ready and you're calling you call the dispatcher and you call the deputy, and because he's in Mount Carroll, and you say, "Hey, I got to get dressed. I gotta head that way." What's going through your mind at that point? That this is just another call, or at that point, what's going through your mind?
No, the first thing that goes through a coroner's mind is identification. And we tell ourselves that on the way to a scene that, hey, my first priority is identification. And so that's one thing we want to focus on when we get to the scene, and we want any information to come to us that is going to help us in that situation. That's first and foremost. After that, it's looking at what you have at a scene. Every single scene is different. And that information is given to us quite often by law enforcement that's already there on the scene, sometimes reports from witnesses and so forth, right there on the scene. So we try to gather as much information as we can and have our own eyes to look at everything. And then in this particular case, we also had a crime scene specialist come from the Illinois State Police. And so I think he arrived prior to me at the scene and had already begun his work. And he and I, as the coroner's office, we have very close communication at a scene. Some things that he finds might develop and we need to talk about. Some things that I might have in my mind about the scene might be important for him to gather evidence. He's the critical evidence person on scene. So that's a great benefit for our county to have the Illinois State Police involved in their crime scene technician. There are a lot of situations that we need to be on the scene right away. And that's when a crime scene technician is not going to be there. That's when law enforcement is, maybe there's only one law enforcement person there. Maybe it's a situation that the coroner is going to handle all investigation. And so we need to be on the scene right away. If the scene is secure, which this scene was secure, and the crime scene tech is coming, and he is the person that's going to really gather all evidence, I want to be there when he arrives, certainly. We always like to come as early as we can, although I know sometimes the sheriff's department will say, hey, don't wake him yet, because otherwise he has to wait an hour for the crime scene person to come. So I did not have that conversation with anybody about that. So I'm not certain about the thinking about it.
For you to have not gotten the call, for them not to request you until an hour and a half later, you wouldn't consider that odd at face value?
That is correct.
Okay.
But now, if you add up other things and something else comes into play, then it always could become something. In this case, certainly that was in the back of my mind, and so I double-checked throughout the entire case from the start until the inquest. Would be double-checking those things as just part of my responsibility.
So now you arrive to the scene with your deputy. Who's there? What do you see? What's running through your mind once you're on scene? What's the scene look like, and what's going through your mind?
So when I first arrived on scene, I spoke directly with Sheriff Clipping, and he let me know that a little bit about what he knew and had found out, and he knew that who was there reporting, who had called into the dispatch. He knew that had happened, and knew that it was an off-duty deputy, and he informed me right away about that. And for me, in those moments, that was something that gave me security. That, hey, the information we're going to be getting is coming from a deputy, coming from someone in law enforcement. He's the first on the scene. And so we should be taking this information as good.
What questions did you ask the sheriff in regards to the individuals that reported finding the body? Was there, what information were you given?
At that point, I didn't ask any questions from him. He found me to tell me that quickly, and then he was back doing kind of his responsibilities. And then I went and spoke directly with the crime scene technician.
Gotcha.
And tried to get a good visibility of the whole scene at that moment.
What was the thought process while you were there at the scene? How long were you at the scene? And then what was on your mind by the time you were already leaving the scene?
Sure. So at the scene, we didn't know exactly what took place yet. We also didn't know Jackson's identity yet. Even after we had transported his body back to the morgue in Savannah, we still did not know his identity at that point. I didn't recognize him. Anyone else at the scene did not recognize him at that time. Certainly, I don't know him. Didn't know him personally. So, it wasn't odd for me not to recognize him. But at this scene, we were trying to also figure out what took place. And the evidence was presenting itself as though, a possibility might be that somebody fell off the back of a motorcycle. Another possibility might be that someone was on a pickup truck and fell off. It didn't look like a traditional scene in which there was impact and into the body, where someone would be upright and then carrying them anywhere. It didn't look like that. All the evidence was close by the body, and the body was actually in the middle of quite a bit of the evidence, which led me to believe as a coroner, just the thought process was that somehow he came down here, and then the evidence went in both directions.
Gotcha, because there's been some debate on, that there was multiple kind of theories presented about how it transpired. So you would say, at that time when you were there present observing the scene, that there was some uncertainty about what actually transpired based on what you saw at the scene, obviously not after the autopsy. But at the scene, that was a consensus that there wasn't a consensus.
That is correct. And so there were different thoughts about what took place. Certainly what this came to be known as really was not in the back of my mind at that time, because of the golden information that was coming from a law enforcement official. That they had gone around. And so we were looking for any other kind of option in that.
The kind of devil's advocate that there wasn't anything nefarious or anything like that. The devil's advocate would be, I mean, it was a snowball. It was like the telephone game, essentially, kind of, where, you have an off-duty deputy and an off-duty paramedic giving you the assessment, and that assessment kind of carried everyone through the morning because they had no reason to doubt the assessment of a law enforcement officer and a paramedic. The paramedic even was a slam dunk. Was that truly the kind of feeling that morning? That
is correct. Through the first couple of hours, that certainly carried some weight.
At what point, what piece of information did you get where it first hit you that, something that it was not on my mind has now come into my mind? Like, was it the autopsy and you realized he was struck by a vehicle? Like, what was there a piece of information from law enforcement, or did someone give you an update on what ISP was doing? Like, when was it and what was it that made you go,
This brings up the investigation, which initially was handled by the Carroll County Sheriff's Department in the first couple of hours. And within that first couple of hours, Sheriff Clipping identified the fact that, hey, there's more to this, and it could involve our deputy. And so he immediately handed that over to the Illinois State Police. And that was in the morning. I was at we had just finished identifying who Jackson was at that moment. And soon after that is when it was handed over to the Illinois State Police. I learned that and began communicating with the Illinois State Police. I think in this that Sheriff Clipping did a good job in doing that. The Illinois State Police are the unsung heroes. The investigative unit are the unsung heroes in this case. They gathered evidence, and when that evidence was gathered over the next 48 hours, it became clear to me that another piece of evidence that this was really something completely different, and that we really were deceived in the information that we were given up front.
During that morning, from your understanding, you didn't have a reason to believe that that initial information may have been a deception the whole time. So everything was based on a lie, necessarily.
That is correct.
Allegedly.
That is correct.
And so you didn't realize that until Illinois State Police did their 48-hour investigation.
That is correct.
Gotcha. And so no one called you before ISP. Did anyone call you before ISP took over to inform you that, or to tell you anything about that?
Sheriff Clipping notified me that he was handing the investigation over to the Illinois State Police.
Gotcha. And he told you why?
Just said that it looks like it could be a conflict of interest.
Gotcha. What did you think when you heard that?
In those moments, I try not to jump to any conclusions. We're trained not to jump to conclusions. And so we try to keep a wide scope of what things can be, still keeping every possibility on the table. Not knowing that this could or could not be a suicide, not knowing that this could or could not be something that involved other people that placed Jackson there. Not knowing that, certainly that maybe it was a vehicle, or not knowing it was an accident that he came off of some other vehicle.
Gotcha. So it is true that there was not a confident consensus about what happened until the investigation. At the scene, it was not clear.
That is correct.
Okay.
I did not receive any information that would lead me to believe, what we know now.
So it's safe to assume that, do you think, based on that information, that observation, that it wasn't a consensus, do you believe it would have been difficult for Officer Marth to kind of put 2 and 2 together and like, boom, you come up, holy cow, what's going on here? Do you think in hindsight that maybe they should have stayed there longer? Or do you think based on what you saw at the scene that it wasn't necessarily clear that the people reporting it may have been involved or deceiving? Like, you know what I mean? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, the question makes sense.
Okay.
Because I think it's certainly a question that anyone in the public would have too.
Yeah.
And so the question is a good question. As I work through things, we work closely with the law enforcement that's on scene. There's many parties that work closely together to get an investigation done in most cases. The coroner is administrating his part of it, so my part of it I'm administrating. Sheriff's Department is administrating their part of it. And quite often we want to allow them to do their job and allow them to handle, and in this case, in the beginning, they were handling the entire investigation. And I had plenty of personnel on scene at that time with their investigative people also. The sheriff, the number 2 person in the Sheriff's Department, who's a top investigator, also their other scene investigator was on the scene. So they had all their personnel there. And with that on the scene, I as a coroner can really focus on identifying the deceased and then going about gathering the evidence with the technician and asking questions or trying to come up with a scenario that may have taken place. We can focus on that. We don't have to worry about what's going on with the law enforcement and who saw who in the beginning and so forth. That wasn't even in my vision at that time. Not until much later when I knew that transparency was going to be a big part of this case for our community and everything needed to be laid on the table. Then it became important.
When and what sparked that? We were like, hold up, this needs more attention.
Yeah, I think that thought came into my mind many different times. Probably in September. Through August, there's certainly investigation going on and a lot of work going on. Also, it had been handed over to the Illinois State Police Investigative Unit, and they're doing their work. The prosecution of this, if there was to be any prosecution, had been handed over to the Illinois Appellate Court Special Prosecutor. And for me, that's I don't know what goes on behind the curtain there, but I do know they probably have a caseload that they're working with. And so it was not surprising in any way that this was going through August and even into September. But I'd say in September, then I began asking a little bit more about updates on the case and any movement in the case. Because personally, I had known certainly through that time period that something should be done. These things should be looked at in a legal manner, and something should be done. So not knowing exactly what that would be at that time, certainly leaving that in the hands of the special prosecutor. And so late September, I began to have some concern. October, certainly concern.
What were the concerns?
That there would be something to develop in this case, because I was seeing no development of the case from a prosecution standpoint or from a inquiry standpoint from the prosecution's office. So that was a concern, and I was having good communication with the Illinois State Police Investigative Unit, and frankly, I think were frustrated also with the time frame. But in that, I've learned of the caseload the special prosecutor has. So that's also part of it that we have to deal with. It's a reality. And so the statute in the state says that the coroner, if he knows there's the verbiage is actually a known slayer, but if you know that there's somebody with some responsibility in the case of a death, then you have the obligation, it's not a choice, but you have the obligation to bring that to some kind of resolution, whether it's in front of a judge or whether it's with an inquest. Yeah, in early November, I sent out a press release. And the press release, probably the most important sentence in that, from my perspective, was that the coroner has a role to play in this case. And so at that time, I was pushing for a date for an inquest, also communicating with the special prosecutor's office. I was not getting a lot of information back from them, and certainly understand that. But also I understand that I have responsibilities as a coroner. And so I set a date and notified them that I was setting a date of inquest. And that date was set for December 13th. It subsequently was delayed 1 month. And I think that was of good fortune for every party involved. And then so the inquest took place on January 13th.
You said it was delayed the month, and you said that was good for all parties involved. Why was it delayed, and why do you think delaying it a month was a benefit?
I think it was a benefit because it gave us more time. This is such a big case with so much information. We had 46 exhibits in the inquest. We had 12 or 13 witnesses that were important, each and every one of them. And so just a lot of information. And when going into an inquest, normally an inquest might last just a short time. You might have 4 or 5 pieces of evidence or 1 or 2 pieces of evidence. You might have more of a story to tell the jury, and then allow the jury to make a decision about what the manner of death was. In this case, we had so much information to bring that all had a connection to the manner of death. And as a coroner, in order for me to go into an inquest, I've got to do an investigation that's independent of the Illinois State Police, that's independent of the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. And so I at the same time was gathering all of their information, and also then inquiring myself to the witnesses I thought were important, bringing them in and interviewing them. Each witness, I believe, had 2 interviews prior to the inquest, which is also important.
Who conducted those interviews?
I performed the interviews with them. And the interviews are to find out information and to understand their story in the best way possible. So certainly that's all important, preparing for an inquest and trying to bring the truth to light for our community.
But why, though? If Illinois State Police investigated it, it's in the hands of a special prosecutor. Why did coroners obviously have a role to investigate deaths, to get the manner of death and whatnot, and provide that closure and that information. But like you said, inquests are typically short and just kind of get to the point,
Sure.
come to that conclusion as a community, come to that conclusion, which is what the coroner position was intended to be long ago, without having a medical examiner. They have a coroner, we discussed. But why, though? Why did you feel that this needed to be 2 days and we need to unveil evidence when it's in a special prosecutor's hands? Why did you feel like you needed to do that work?
I like that question because it's important. I was not getting information that gave me any indication that there would be a prosecution or any charges or any inquiry into this situation. And I answer to the residents of Carroll County. They elected me to be their coroner. And my responsibility is to look into this death, along with every other death that occurs. And if I see something that is important to be moved along, that's my responsibility to see that moved along. And without getting any information that it was going that direction, I also need to take action. For me, the litmus test was, hey, is the evidence going to still be here in another 6 months? Would the witness testimony still be here in another 6 months? Would people remember things in detail in another 6 months? And so for me, the answer was simple. That was no, those things would be degraded, and action needed to be taken now. There have been a few times in my career that, times as a father, that you say, hey, whatever's going on here with you, and I'm using one of my sons as an example, this is not happening on my watch. In my profession as a funeral director, I had a funeral service taking place in a church, and there was a gentleman that had a gun on his possession and was actually getting ready to use that gun. And I was the only person that was close to that individual as he was outside the church. And I had to say to myself, this is not happening on my watch. And then I was able to get that gun. This was similar in that case, that everything built up in a way, and I was also seeing my community adjudicate this case in the public on Facebook. And for me, that's not a good situation. It's not a good situation that for our community, as it degrades trust in our law enforcement. And our local law enforcement, sheriff's department, should have the community's trust. They operate that way. They deserve that trust. And in this case, with everything that had been taking place and all of the discussion that takes place today online, I thought that was very negative for our community. And they needed the transparency of what was really taking place. I also didn't know what any outcome would be, and I truthfully think if an inquest was not held in this case, and I think it's come to be proven that maybe there wouldn't have been charges brought, or wouldn't have been charges brought for quite some time.
You still had to have some little bit of nervousness for a few reasons. You grew up here. You've had this long career, and it's been a family business. You're going to go into something that if it does not go well, it could completely tarnish your reputation, could completely tarnish the business, tarnish the career, everything you worked for in the family as well. And then at the same time, you could also jeopardize any possible criminal charges. You know, how did you wrestle those two fairly highly significant consequences going into it? What made you go, hey, I could ruin my entire reputation, everything I've worked for, me and my family and my father or whatnot, or I've been wanting to get justice for this case, and what if this completely throws out any potential criminal charges and it is all for naught? How did you wrestle with those possibilities? There
was not a thought of reputation in my mind. And none of that entered my mind. Whether I could do it or not was a thought. Whether I needed to do it was not a thought. That was clear to me as a coroner. And if I follow the statutes of the state of Illinois for the coroner's office, then it is very clear to me. It lays it right out there that you need to be involved in this case. And so for me, it's important to take action. And that action, sometimes you can't foretell everything that's going to take place. Taking action is the important part. And so I knew I needed to take action, and then also began to put a team together that supported me in this. So my stepfather happens to be an attorney, and I deputized him as a coroner, and he became part of my team. And with that knowledge and planning and ability, we were able then to do that in the way that we knew we would not jeopardize any other proceedings in this case. And once again, the idea of worrying about anything else really wasn't on my purview at all. In this case, we didn't know everything. It was a lot of mystery in this case, in terms of the cause and the manner of death. And so I would like to think that any coroner would make that decision. I know when we have local prosecution handling things, it's a lot easier to allow the prosecutor to do his work, because he's going to communicate with me and let me know what's taking place. In this particular case, which was unique, the special prosecutor is part of his office, and I'm not receiving much of that information, and the period of time is also causing me some apprehension in terms of the integrity of the case. And so that's why I took the action, and I would like to think that any coroner would take that action. The worst case scenario for me in this case was that nothing would ever take place. And that could happen for a few reasons. It could be too far down the line by the time that the inquiry was made, and there's no evidence there. It could be that maybe there's something else going on with protection of individuals because of the line of work they're in, and those things aren't going to happen on my watch.
Does that come full circle here to now trying to convince coroners to assert their power authority for cases that are unique like this? Kind of, how do you wrap that together all the way back from your father convincing the county to keep the coroner position and defending that position, not just him and his job, but the position itself? How does that come full circle here when you think about that, on trying to convince coroners to be more like this, to do what you did when the opportunity and the need arises?
To any coroner, I would say follow your training and communicate with each other. You can always, we're good sounding boards for each other. I thought about what my father had fought against at that time, that he preserved the coroner's office in Carroll County. And so that was certainly in my mind, that, hey, this is an important part of my responsibility also today. That's also given to us in our training as coroners. And so I would tell any coroner, rely upon your training, and know the statutes of the state, because it's the statutes of the state that give us our responsibility and how we should execute our office. And so in this case, I think we did a fair job, and we executed a fair inquest and truthful inquest. And I hope it plays out so that that fairness, that truth, is part of the families involved, and it helps them all get through it.